Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Izan bin Fakhrudazi. My number matrix is 1213510. Now I will explain about the introduction of international trade from Islamic perspective. Firstly, I would like to introduce what is international trade from modern perspective. International trade is means as a transaction refers to the exchange of a good or service. This include import and export already available. What is import? Import means a product or service that is introduced into the country. While an export is a product or service that is delivered to a different country. In modern perspective, are usually done with the goal of providing the country with commodity in short supply in exchange for the resources it produces with many in the country. Global event effect and affected by supply and demand and pricing in the global economy. There is much work being done to explain business, theory, policy and strategy in modern international trade. So international transaction not just to allow people to trade products and service, but they will also people to get to know international trade. Next, I want to talk about international trade from Islamic perspective. The Islamic perspective suggests for Muslim traders to comply with Sharia rule when doing trade. In Islam, refers to Sharia principle takes priority over personal profit. The underlying principle must be to be ensured that the transaction and method of conducting business operation are legal. Eventually, accumulating profit and wealth will improve society as a whole and improving general well-being someone. When doing trade, the Quran identifies the importance of mutual benefit and respect between buyers and sellers. Trust, justice, fairness and equity are among the principles considered most important in commercial relationship. In addition, any transaction that may create more great harm to the country, society and environment. Free trade and national competition are allowed in Islam, so Islam puts a high importance and maintenance on trade for every Muslim.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Sahli bin Murashdi. My matric number 1212628. Now I want to talk about identify and evolution and theories of trade from Islamic perspective. In Islam, international trade is a subject of muamalah, and muamalah maqsid is human happiness. If we pay attention to the terms of many types of transaction, such as buying and selling or renting and selling, essentially it is the exchange of advantages between humans, which one party assisting and complementing the others in some ways. International commerce is required since it is difficult for one country to achieve its demand without the assistance of another. As a result, international commerce in Islam is not as popular as it is among greedy capitalists. Import tariffs, import quotas, and export subsidies are the three regulations that govern international commerce in Islam. Next, I will continue to my part that Islamic international trade has a long history of being a remarkable and unrivaled trade. As a result, international trade is established since it is hard for one country to satisfy its demand without the assistance of another. International commerce, according to Sharia, is for the advantage of the country. Thus, please assist in achieving benefits and complementing each other. For some nations, Islam has adopted the notion of international trade, which was pioneered by a famous scholar named Abu Ubaid bin Salam bin Miskin bin Zaid al-Zaidi, who focused on export and imports. The absence of zero tariff in international commerce divides Abu Ubaid's opinions on export and imports into three groups.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. International trade policy. An international trade policy is a set of laws and regulations that the government use to control or affect international trade flows. This strategy is part of a larger economic policy package aimed at improving the well-being of various sections of society or achieving specific national and international goals. The policy can be used to either encourage exports through free trade or to restrict imports through protectionist regulations. The Export Trading Company (ETCA) of the United States, for example, allows US companies to collaborate to cut export costs, improve exporting efficiency, and better compete in the worldwide market, among other things. As a result, these companies benefit from lower shipping costs, more negotiation leverage, and the potential to fill large export orders, among other things. International trade policy can be divided into two categories. First is free trade. Free trade is a mostly theoretical policy in which government impose no tariffs, taxes, or charges on imports and no export limits. In this view, free trade is the polar opposite of protectionism, which is a defensive trade policy aimed at preventing foreign competition. Government with many free trade policy, on the other hand, still impose some controls on imports and exports. For example, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is NAFTA, and a FTA between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, is one of the best known FTAs. Next is trade protectionism. Measure and purposeful policy by a nation to control imports while promoting exports. For example, if a Malaysian manufacturer produces goods domestically that were more expensive than foreign imports, the government might enact tariffs or import taxes which boost the price of the foreign-made products. The effect will be to make Malaysian-made goods more competitive in price. Tariffs that charge imports are the most prevalent protectionist technique. Import item prices skyrocket as a result when compared to domestically made items. They become less competitive. Preferential trade agreements. Countries enter into trade agreements with the goal of reducing or eliminating barriers to the free flow of goods, services, and production components. GATT was the first multilateral trade pact in economic history when it was signed in 1947. After the Great Depression and trade wars of the 1930s, when the world tariffs level rose off to an unprecedented height, the GATT was founded with the goals of establishing a liberal multilateral trading system. According to Clements and Williamson 2001, the average tariff rate was up 25% higher than it was in the 1930s. Over time, the GATT was able to steadily lower tariffs. However, the multilateral trade organization has encountered considerable obstacles in the discussion since the completion of the Uruguay round. Next, proliferation of free trade agreements. The number of free trade agreements initiated and signed expanded exponentially in the 2000s. There was 124 regional trade agreements relating to trade in goods for the period between 1948 and 1994. As compared to over 400 additional arrangements covering not only trade in goods but also services since the creation of the WTO in 1955. Bilateral trade agreements and agreement between two countries to provide each other privileged commercial status. The agreement's main goals are to provide the partners more market access and make trade easier. Malaysia has bilateral trade agreements with Japan, Australia, China, India, New Zealand, Pakistan, Turkey, and the European Union, among others. Developed nations, particularly the United States and the European Union, also utilize bilateral FTAs to promote their economic interests in areas that are either not addressed at all in the WTO or are difficult to reach an agreement on in the WTO, such as requests for greater liberalization in service and intellectual property rights, investment, competition, policy, government, procurement, together known as Singapore issue or new issue, labor, and the environment are amongst areas that members of the WTO have flatly rejected. Next is regional trade agreements. Agreement, a regional trade agreement is an agreement between two or more states that establish trade regulation for all participants. The North American Free Trade Agreement, the Central American Dominican Republic Free Trade Agreement, the European Union, and the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation are examples of regional trade agreements. The number of regional trade agreements is growing and their character is evolving. In 1990, 50 trade agreements were in effect. In 2017, there were over 280. Many trade agreements today go beyond tariffs to encompass a variety of policy areas that impact trade and investment in products and in products and services such as competition policy, government procurement laws, and intellectual property rights. Trends in global trade. International merchandise trade fell by 20% in volumes between the fall of 2008 and the spring of 2009 as a result of the global crisis. After a rapid recovery in mid-2009, foreign merchandise trade growth slowed in 2010s, while the global crisis appeared to have had little effect on the dynamism of global trade in that year. The worldwide trade remained significantly below its pre-crisis growth trajectory chart, with global prospect dimming years end. Apart from the fact that it's yet complete, the trade recovery has been unequal by the end of 2011. Merchandise trade in volume terms had yet to recapture in pre-crisis level in industrialized countries, as well as in Southeast Europe and the Commonwealth of Independent States. Next is a global trade policy in Malaysia and Japan. Southeast Asia is the epicenter of trades, and Malaysia is one of Asia's major trading centers. Malaysia is a developing country with a long history of maintaining reasonably open trade and investment policy system. Malaysia's primary export items after independence were rubber and tin, which accounted for 60% and 12% of the country's total exports, respectively. Following independence, Malaysia has made numerous improvements and diversified the country agriculture and manufacturing sectors. Trade strategies were added by tax incentive and free trade zones, and exporting processing facilities were established to attract international investment. Malaysian manufactured goods accounted for 77.4% of total exports in 1994. Specific import permission are required for some regulated products such as plants, motor vehicles, tins, ore, guns, and explosives, some medication, soil samples, and certain foodstuff. Under Malaysia's existing import trade policy, luxury commodities such as liquor and cigarettes are subject to a higher levy, which range from 2% to 60% with an average area of 50%. Malaysia also bans some caustic chemical as well as all products from Yugoslavia and Israel. Japan's trade policy refers to the country's strategy to importing and exporting goods to other countries. Export development was a major focus of Japanese government policy for many years. Officials in the Japanese government recognize that the country needed to import in order to expand and develop. Japan is remain Australia's second largest trading partner and export market, and it is expected to remain for some time. And it was two-way goods and service that trade between Australia and Japan was $60.3 billion. So export of product of Japan equal billion, and such as coal, iron ore, beef, and copper ores and concentration were among Australia's top export to Japan in 2015 until 2016. Beef, fish, fruits, and vegetable juices, animal, fuel, coal, require propane and butane, aluminium, transmission shafts, dairy products, and natural gas were among Australia's top exports. On the other hand, on the other side of the ledger.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Fikri bin Kamal Zaman. My matric number is 1212641. So I will make a conclusion for our group assignment. Based on the result of the review and the empirical evidence presented on this paper about the international trade from Islamic perspective. As we know, trade is the one of the most important and the oldest transaction in the history. Trade process have played an active role not only in the movement of money and goods, but also its convergence civilization cultures, religions among peoples and nations, where the primary role has centered on the flow of good, capital, human resource, and services. Our first point, which is we can identify an evolution and theories of trade from Islamic perspective. International trade as defined is for the benefit of the country, as is in the accomplishment of benefit and is beneficial to some countries. Our second point, we can conclude that a system of law and regulation used by the government to manage or influence international trade flows is known as an international trade policy. Last but not least, we have made a comparison between global trade policy in Malaysia and Japanese, that the relatively low energy consumption in underdeveloped country is both a cause and an effect of present development challenge. So that's all. Thank you.